Losing a trial as a plaintiff's attorney, there's nothing worse. Sitting there, standing up with your client and hearing the verdict, you never lose that feeling.
You know, not to be cliche, right? But it's all about telling the right story. You can't just walk in there and go, there was a crash, they had this medical treatment, we're asking for X amount of dollars, right?
Hablar con ellos en español es aún mejor porque están hablando con un abogado que ya puede comunicar con ellos también. And so how do we go about shifting that to say, no, this is a case that really my client needs to take the risk on? And how do you work to convince your client to do that, to say, okay, let's take the risk together? This is Turning Points Covenant of Justice. I'm Isaiah Jerez. Today we have attorney Will Mitchell. He's here today. He's talking about how he has shifted and changed his life from working for the insurance companies and representing individuals in front of a jury and 10xing the offers that the insurance companies make.
Yeah, hey, awesome, Isaiah. I'm really happy to be here. Let's do this thing.
I think only recently in the past year have I had a nicer car than any of my paralegals or legal assistants. My legal assistant that worked for me for, I think, almost a decade, she always drove a Mercedes.
Oh, right.
And I was driving these little Hondas, or I remember when I first started, I was driving this Buick from like the 1980s.
Yeah. No, yeah. So like the first 3 years that I was a lawyer, I drove an '07 Prius with 150,000 miles on it. It was because before law school, that's what my wife drove. And then we went to law school in Wyoming. It's freezing up there. And like, you can't drive a Prius around and be safe. It's like little teeny tiny tires. It's 2-wheel drive. So I bought her like a 4-wheel drive SUV, but we're going to law school. I couldn't afford another car. So I sold my truck, bought her that. And then I was just rolling in that Prius. And then we finished law school and, you know, everybody wants to, man, I'm a lawyer now. I'm going to start making some money, like buy a nice car. But like, man, I just figured, okay, if I can just pay off these student loans, you know? And so I just kept rolling, like, and then, you know, we upgraded her to like, oh man, a 15-year-old minivan. And I just kept rolling the Prius. And I just thought, well, I'm just going to drive this thing till it dies. And that thing wouldn't die.
Oh, no. So you're still driving after years.
So finally, I think after like 3 years or something like that, I paid off all my student loans and I wanted to buy a truck because my hobby is team roping. So like I have a truck, I have a trailer, I have horses and stuff like that. And I compete doing that. But it's an expensive hobby. And so I knew I couldn't like service the debt on the student loans, feed my family, and like have this hobby. And anyway, so I finally like got some dude on Craigslist and sold that Prius and, you know, but paid cash for my truck. And, you know, and I still drive a truck, which is terrible. Like I ran around, we don't have a runner, and like, a
legal runner, someone to run the documents around to the office, go pick up checks.
You got it, right? So our office, we don't, or some, you know, in different industries, they call them a gopher, right? Like just somebody that goes for things. Mm-hmm. And we had like 3 settlement checks in various places around the city yesterday that need to be picked up. And if they get them relatively early, I'll just say, hey, just mail them to us. But this insurance company had dragged their feet for like 5 weeks to get these checks to our clients. And they're this sweet older couple. They're both going through cancer treatment in California. And they've been super understanding, you know. I'm like, hey, you know, we haven't got it yet. And so they finally emailed me yesterday. We got them. You want us to pop them in the mail? I'm like, I'm driving to Summerlin, you know. So like I spent probably 3 hours in the truck yesterday going around the city, you know, like probably $50, $60 for the gas. But I'm like, man, if I tell them to pop it in the mail next week, I'm going to be like, hey, any sign? They're going to be like, oh my gosh, sorry, we forgot to mail them, you know. And I'm like, let's just get this thing done. And, you know, I was able to get the checks out today and text them and be like, hey, your checks are in the mail. Thanks for everything. And, you know, I don't know if you found this, but the not huge checks are more grateful than the ones who get hundreds of thousands of dollars and they're like, that's all? You know what I mean? Like, it just kind of, there doesn't seem to be any real correlation between the size of the settlement and like the amount of gratitude.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. And I mean, you going above and beyond for the clients, right? Those little things mean so much to the clients to say, hey, like you care about them. You recognize their situation and you're going to take the time out of your day, which is super valuable, and just go all the way across town and pick up these checks. And maybe something they don't see, the sacrifice, but yeah, I'm sure they appreciate the whole benefit of that.
So yeah, and I didn't tell them because, you know, but who I did tell is, so the lawyer that referred us those cases, so he's Korean, they're Korean. They communicate a lot easier than I do with them. And I told him, hey, this is what's going on. And so like he appreciates that. And so, you know, to the extent that there's any pay it forward, like he knows that I'm going to do what we got to do to like make his clients happy, kind of a thing. And those people, like, they're happy about the check that
So when I worked for the insurance companies, you'd be working tooth and nail, litigating case, working really hard. You end up winning the case. There's zero money that they have to pay out. And there was like no gratitude whatsoever. It was like you send them the bill and whatever happens to that bill happened. And they just start focusing on what the next case was. But today we gave our client a small check, $11,000. And my wife had to come into the office. She had our baby with her, meets with the client. The client was just ecstatic, right? She had gone to the ER after the crash, had like a month of chiropractic treatment, and now she was getting a check for $11,000. She was super happy. And just that reaction versus the insurance company that saved $100,000, $200,000 was just night and day.
For sure. And like, you know, you and I say, like, we're in the fortunate position where we say $11,000 is a small check, right? Like, we're in a very fortunate position. And I tell clients this all the time when I'm trying to express to them, not my indifference about their case, but just like, I want you to make this decision. I'll tell them, like, if it's a tough decision with the case, because I go, I have lots of cases, right? If your case goes kaput and it's worth nothing, like, I'm going to be fine because I have lots of cases. But I'm not gambling with your case. This is your case. And hopefully it's your only one, right? Hopefully this is the only time you get injured. And so like, I just want you, I'll guide you. I'm going to give you my 2 cents, but you make this decision because I'm going to be fine. Right. And so, no, but it's funny, you know, you're talking about insurance defense. So I did insurance defense and represented insurance companies and large corporations for 7 years, the first 7 years of my practice. And one of the last trials I did, you know, it was this lady who'd been in a car accident. And, you know, it was one of those that like, it was questionable whether she, I mean, the cases that go to trial are about 2 things, right? It's either that the damages are so astronomical that like a settlement really just can't be reached, right? They're millions of dollars. And an insurance company is not necessarily saying like, your case isn't worth millions of dollars. They're just saying usually like, we might have to pay it, but you're going to have to fight us for it, you know? Or the other type of cases, it's like, there's a legitimate question whether this person was injured or like whether or not we did anything wrong to cause their injury, right? And those are a lot of times the cases that go to trial. So this lady had been rear-ended and she'd been in another accident, and the medical records really just pointed to the fact that it was the other crash and not ours, right? So I go to trial for one of the big insurance, I guess we can say their name, State Farm, you know, I don't know why I wouldn't say their name. And the plaintiff, the lady who was claiming an injury, she had offered to settle her last, hey, this is our bottom dollar. We'll settle for $1 million right before trial. And I think State Farm's policy was like $100,000, right? And they're like, we're not paying $1 million. And I would have told them not to. It wasn't worth that. So we go to trial, pick a jury for 2 days. Plaintiff gives their opening. I stand up and give my opening. And partway through my opening, there's like a technical glitch. And the judge says, hey, I need you to pause, Mr. Mitchell. We need to fix this technical glitch. And plaintiff counsel walks over and goes, hey, what about $200,000? And I was like, I'll make a call. You know, it's not my money. I don't, you know, whatever. State Farm's like, absolutely not. We'll pay $100,000. And during my opening, on a case that they'd spent years and years, you know, litigating, they settled for $100,000, right? So a week before, $1 million. State Farm ends up paying $100,000 to settle the case. I get back to the office, try to call the State Farm adjuster. They're not there. I leave them a voicemail. Hey, you're not going to believe this. Here's what's going on. Their response was a 1-sentence email that just said, I received your voicemail. Please forward me your final bill.
No gratitude whatsoever.
And the thing is, that adjuster, it's like, it's not his money. And he's got a bunch of different files. I'm like, sure, could he have expressed gratitude that I saved his butt and this one could have blown up one of his files? Yeah, but it's like, at the end of the day, he's a guy at a call center in Phoenix somewhere, and he just wants to go home to his family for the day. And, you know, maybe go to the park on the weekend or whatever, or go see the movies. Like, he's not just ate up about what's going on in Las Vegas in some trial. But yeah, to your point, it's like, wouldn't have been nice to get a phone call and go, man, Will, we sure appreciate the work that you did on this one. What a result. Holy cow. And just kind of celebrate together. Send us your bill, thanks. Not even thanks, I don't think. Just send us your bill. A lot of the insurance companies now, they're not even paying hourly rates. They're paying flat fees, which is tough because, as you know, a contingency fee that we do where we only get paid if and when we win someone's case, the insurance company wants to go, look, the flat fee is $10,000. Win, lose, or draw, we're paying you $10,000 on this case. But if the case is going to last 3 years and you've got overhead and paralegals and everything like that, $10,000 is nothing,
Yeah, when I was doing work with the insurance company was trying to push our firm to do that, to go to the flat fee base, and we were a small firm. And so at that point, the guy I was working for, he said, I can't do this. I'm not going to work on a flat fee because I cannot properly represent my clients that way. I'm not going to be able to provide the defense to them that way. And so he left and went to a larger firm, a big national firm, and that was kind of my kick in the butt to then get out of that industry. It was real supportive for me. But yeah, if these insurance companies do that, right? They're liable for those judgments that then come down the pipeline for trying to save a few bucks.
Yeah, and the industry has just changed so much. So my dad was a lawyer here in Las Vegas, and he still is.
What's his first name?
Bert. So Bert Mitchell, shout out Bert. Anyone, I would say 50 and older. How old are you? I know you're.
I'm 50.
So yeah. You're just under. I would say anyone on the back end of their 40s, or certainly 50 and older, that does personal injury or insurance defense in Vegas, for the most part, knows my dad and loves him. Like, it was a really nice foot in the door for me going into my first trials and arbitrations and ECCs, where we have these conferences with other lawyers on the phone and depositions to go, I'm Bert Mitchell's son. And people, oh my gosh, and they've got stories about my dad. He's just the nicest guy and everyone loves him. And he did insurance defense his whole life. And when he did insurance defense, all the adjusters, the representatives from the insurance company, they're here in town. They'd go to lunch together. He'd take him to the rodeo when he'd come to town. They went to each other's kids' things. Like, they were friends, And the insurance companies now have cut everything. They've pulled it back. They fired all those people. And now they just have people either at home or in a call center in like Washington or Arizona. And I would have adjusters who I had a great relationship on the phone, right? Super nice, but I wouldn't know them if they walked into this room.
Oh, no.
And we worked together for 5 years, 6 years, sending me cases. But like, I have no idea who they are. I don't know what they look like, nothing. So no personal touch at all. It's totally just like, I'm called from my cubicle to your cubicle and, that's it.
Talking about your father, Bert Mitchell, had a great name here in town, still does have a great name here in town. You said it provides you with a foot in the door, but it sounds like it, even more than that. Like, you have kind of this legacy, this name to live up to because you represent him in some sense. And so how has that been to you? Has it kind of been a weight? Has it been an inspiration?
Not a weight, unless in a positive way. Certainly not in a negative way. And the thing is, most people now that are your age, or so there's about a 10-year split between you and I, don't know my dad. But certainly in the beginning, you don't want to be, no one, every job that I've ever gotten, law school, being a lawyer, even before that, is because of who I knew, not what I knew, right? Now, the law firm that I was hired by out of law school was not owned by my dad. He called no shots there. He's not a partner. But they definitely hired me because of who my dad is, right? And so you never want to be the guy that's just like, that's just Bert's son down the hall, and we keep him around because we like his dad. And so 100% when I started off, there was like, hey, I got to prove myself. Like, I got to make sure that these guys know that, like, I'm here to really do it, like I'm here to try hard and work hard. And it's not just that who my daddy is, And I think that happened, I think people, I've been practicing for 8 years now, and people certainly still know my dad, but I haven't been called Bert's son in quite a while. Not that I wouldn't love to be. I love when people bring up my dad, but I think definitely in the beginning I felt that for sure.
You do work hard, and that as a personal injury attorney, there's a couple different ways or several different ways where you can work to kind of build your market and and get those cases. And one of the ways that you do it and that you're working with is helping other firms with some of the litigation, doing some of the heavy lifting once there's a lot of fighting. And yeah, I mean, you and your firm associated in on a case with me, and it was amazing. Like from day one, like we got just this amazing piece of evidence. Yeah. And it was because of that hard work, the dedication, just like jumping on it right away and getting into it. And so that's been good. With regards to trials, right? Because that's one of the reasons why I opened up my own practice, is because I wanted to try more cases. And fortunately, since I've been on my own for the past 4 years, I haven't tried any cases. Now, part of that was COVID, right? But it gets to the point where it comes down to the client's decision and they don't want to take the risk. And there's a lot of rhetoric saying that we as plaintiffs' attorneys, or should be trial attorneys, is that we're settling the cases that we should be trying, and we're trying the cases that we should settle. And so how do we go about shifting that to say, no, this is a case that really my client needs to take the risk on? And how do you work to then convince your client to do that, to say, okay, let's take the risk together?
Have you read John Morgan's book? I'm blanking on it, but it's like Can't Teach Hungry.
Oh, no, I haven't read that one.
You know who John Morgan is, like
right,
Morgan,
right?
Okay, so he has this famous book, and I recommend it to you. It's called Can't Teach Hungry, and it's about how he started his law firm and everything. And he goes about it, and he says that if we're not careful, we can become claims adjusters with a law degree, right? Where we're just settling cases, and what are we settling for? Just their last best offer. Their last best offer. Whatever the insurance company offers last, that's what we're settling for. We've actually gotten a lot of insurance adjusters to call us and go, why did you file a lawsuit? You know, and we're like, well, you denied liability on this case. And they're like, well, you didn't even send us a demand. And we're like, well, would you have paid the demand? And they're like, well, probably not. And then we're like, look, any personal injury case gets worse as it goes on, right? And so we try and file a lawsuit, if we're not going to settle, relatively as soon as we can. Now, what you're asking about trial is the cases where it's a tough call. Like if they're offering a good amount of money and we could do better at trial, but, you know, hey, the client could get $200,000 right now in their pocket. All we have to do is answer an email and accept the offer. Or we could go to trial and maybe they'll get $500,000, right? That is just going to be totally up to the client, because I'm not going to be the one that goes, oh, and we all have to do that risk assessment. Maybe it's a really good chance, right? And they're just not offering enough money. But if the client can have $200,000 right now and that's what they need, you know, it'd be nice to have a bigger verdict, but I'm not going to deny them that. I think the thing that we need to be careful of as personal injury attorneys is where they're offering pennies. You know, they're going, hey, look, we can put 10 grand in your pocket right now. We can put 5 grand in your pocket right now. But if we go to trial, look, anything can happen, yada, yada, yada. But like, we're probably going to put 50 grand in your pocket or 100 grand in your pocket. Don't take this. Like, that's where we've got to step up and really just make sure that they understand the stakes a little more and not just go, because the reason that a lot of lawyers don't try cases is, one, they don't do it enough. I guess scared, and just like, it's a muscle, right? It's like if you haven't gone to the gym in a long time, like going to trial, it's a muscle. Like, you've got to be comfortable with it. And the other thing is just time. You're running your own practice. You're busy. You know, you're like, man, is it really worth it to go to trial? It's going to take me a week in trial. It's going to take me 2 weeks to get ready for it, plus all the money I got to pay the experts. And so I just think that if we're in the mindset of like, we can't just take the last best offer if it's not good enough. Going back to John Morgan, they have a policy, at least he did at the time of writing his book, that every attorney in his office had to first chair 1 jury trial a year. And like, that's a rule that, I mean, in our firm right now, it's just my partner, Scott, and I. And so, you know, we've done 1 trial and he first chaired it. So I guess I'm down 1, but you know, that's a rule going forward as we grow that I'd really like to have.
And let's talk a little bit about that trial that you guys had. And this was the first trial that you had as a plaintiff's attorney. Is that right? And this was a case basically that I think you had a lot going against you just from day one. It's nothing that you worked up. It was kind of got to trial. They went to Mitchel and Rogers and said, hey, this is a case, you know, you guys can work on.
Yeah. So we had just started our firm, and another firm came along, and they said, hey, look, we've got this case that needs to go to trial. This firm from California referred it to us. we're not really looking to try it. We've shopped it around to a bunch of other firms in transparency and they don't want it. Do you guys want to do it? And I looked at it, and it's a rear end car accident. There's not a lot of damage to either vehicle. And our client ended up having a low back surgery. And so the medical bills are several $100,000. And the most that the insurance company had offered was like $70,000, which was, when you're in that situation, is nothing. It's not going to pay for anything. It's not going to pay the medical bills. It's less than a walkaway offer, right? Like basically our client is going to be in the hole. We had no money. And we said, look, if you'll cover the costs of trying the case, of paying the experts and everything, we'll do it, right? We'll come in. And my partner, Scott, he's the one that really took a look at it, went through everything, wrapped his arms around it. He said to me, I think this is it. I think this is a good bet. I think it's maybe not even 50-50, like that we win this thing, but we've both done a bunch of trials for insurance companies on the defense. Let's get one under our belt. And I said, yeah, we got our time is worth not much right now. We don't have a ton of cases. We don't have any money coming in. Let's go try this thing. We both love going to trial. And we took a case that was worth $70,000 before. And I think our client's own attorneys had offered to settle it before trial for $200,000. That was their last offer. So $70,000, $200,000. And we got a verdict for $540,000. And we settled that case for $690,000 because they paid all our fees and costs. So we 10x'd the insurance company's offer during trial. That's what they offered during trial. Well, hey, $70,000 right now, which was not an easy, it was super easy to say no to. We're like, thanks, but no thanks. The funny thing was, it was so my number one client before switching sides was State Farm.
Oh, that's awesome. The State Farm adjuster that didn't even say thank you.
Yeah. And so was Scott's. And this case was a State Farm file, and I think it was a $100,000 insurance policy. And if you practice personal injury, you know that they only ever want to pay what their policy is. They got paid a premium every month, whether it was $100, $200, whatever that person was paying was for $100,000. They weren't paying a premium for $700,000, right? And so when State Farm or any insurance company has to pay excess, we call it, right? If they have to pay $700,000 on a case, they only got paid premiums for $100,000. They know it, right? They stink. And State Farm's going to be fine. Like, it's not like they're like, we better, tighten up the purse strings. Mitchell Rogers are in town, but, they know it.
Okay. So we're entering into a case like this. The personal injury attorney is going to face a lot of negative influences, right? The attorneys probably drove up the treatment, right? This minor crash, how could it cause it? This Mitchell and Rogers, they probably just want to look for a quick payday. They just want to get paid and take some money out. Like, money's not the reason, or money's not going to solve the issues that the lady has. How did you confront these obstacles in front of the jury, explaining to them that this low impact crash created such severe injuries to your client?
Yeah. So, not to be cliche, right? But it's all about telling the right story. You can't just walk in there and go, there was a crash, they had this medical treatment, we're asking for X amount of dollars, right? Like, you got to tell a story, and you got to find out what the story is, and I'm going to get to what it was in just a second. And then the other thing is, you got to have a piss off factor, right? Like, juries really don't award a lot of money based off of sympathy. They'll award money, but they're not going to award a huge amount of money just because they feel bad. They need to be pissed off at somebody or ticked off at somebody, right? And so what we had in this case is, this guy, he had a low back surgery 15 years ago. He played college football. And he was squatting and blew out his back, and he had a surgery. And then what he had said is, like, I was pretty much fine until this crash, right? Like, I had some stuff here and there, but I was pretty much fine. Then this crash happened, and then my back, went to crap, and I needed another surgery. Well, the night before trial, and just, so everybody knows, this case had been litigated for 3 years. The night before trial, the defense attorney discloses 500 pages of documents of all this prior treatment where our client continued to complain of low back pain pretty consistently over the years, right? And had even gone back to those same doctors after this crash and said, I'm fine. I'm okay. And normally that should be like hey, that stuff's not coming into evidence. You have to disclose it long ago. We all have rules of evidence. The judge let it in. No, I'm sorry. The judge didn't let it into evidence, but he as good as did. He said, I'm not going to let the jury see it, but the attorney can ask him about it. In other words, the attorney can get out the record and go, isn't it true that on such and such date you complained to your doctor's a 9 out of 10 pain? And if our client said no, then he could show him the record and impeach him with it and go, yes, you did, right? And so we just told our client, whatever he says, you got to agree with it. Whatever he says, you got to agree with it. But in those records was an MRI report from a year before the crash where our client did not have the same findings that he had after the crash. So we had a photo, basically, of our client's spine before and after, and there was a change after the crash, and that's what was causing the pain, and that's where they did surgery. So that became the story for our case, and honestly, that's not the story we prepared, right? We found out about that the night before trial, and it changed our whole trial strategy, and we went in there and go, our story is, hey, pictures don't lie, folks. They can tell you about there's not a lot of damage to the back of the car. They can tell you this guy's a liar, right? And our client, really, really nice guy, but he's not a white female elementary school teacher. He's got tattoos up his neck all the way up to here, right? He's not necessarily the person that you would want them to see, right? There's more people that just judge a book by its cover that are more presentable. And then the defense's expert came in, having never seen these MRIs, right? He's looked at the report. So when you get an MRI, you have a report where it says, here's what the findings are, and then you have the pictures of the actual films. He's never seen the films. He gets on the stand and swears up and down, and Scott Rogers, my partner, is cross-examining in front of the jury, and he swears up and down, these are the same findings. It's the exact same before and after. Well, doctor, you've never seen the photos. You're just going off of these two reports. Well, the way that they're describing it, I'm sure it's the same. And that ticks the jury off for sure. So some things are like, that's just a lucky bounce, that we got, where they disclose these prior records that could have been case ending, should have been case ending, but there was this prior MRI in there, and we were limber enough and agile enough that we just went, that's our story. We went all in on that. We scrapped all this other stuff that we were going to go into, and we just came right out to the jury and said, you're not going to hear us say that this was a life-ending crash, that there was tons of property damage, that the cars were destroyed, that he went to the hospital, that there was an ambulance. But guess what? He had back pain on and off over the years, and this being rear-ended, that didn't help, right? They wanted to say that it didn't do anything. Guess what? If you got back pain and somebody crashes into the back of your car, that's not going to help your back pain, newsflash, right? And then combined with the photo, the MRI evidence of the change, that's what the jury needed, They didn't give us what we asked for, but they gave us a heck of a lot more than was being offered.
And these are 500 pages of documents, medical records that are not the easiest to read, maybe not organized quite great. And it's not like a TV lawyer where you've got a whole team back at the office scouring through these records. This is you and Scott already having your trial plan prepped, and then now you've got to go through and look through all these records. So really, you talk about lucky bounce, but that's a lot of hard work.
Sure.
Because your whole plan just changes right before trial. And that's not something that, you say lucky bounce, but you've got to be there to catch the ball. And you two put yourself there to catch the ball.
100%. And Scott, he did such a good job in that trial. He, I was there and handled some of the witnesses and everything, but, he first chaired it. He did the opening, the closing, and handled, the doctor and everything. And, he did a great job. As when you go into trial, you want to be the reasonable guy, and what was tough is the defense attorney on the other side is a great guy. Like, I really like him. And he's very similar to Scott and I in a lot of ways, and so it's not like there was like, hey, Scott and I are super nice, and then there's this jerk on the other side. It's like everyone was a pretty nice guy and like a pretty decent lawyer. And so when we were thinking about how can we get him ticked, they're not going to be ticked at this lawyer because he's just nice and he's a good lawyer. He's not a jerk to the witnesses. He's not going to beat up on our guy,
So my favorite part of trial is cross-examining the experts, because I know the experts, I'm not going to be able to go to bat with them on the science or what they're experts in. It's just not my field. But as an attorney, what we're taught is how to reason, how to reach to the truth by just looking at common sense. And that's what I love is just doing with the experts, is just walking them down that line. And they're focused on all of, whatever whether or not it's medical, whether or not it's engineering. They're focused on those specifics and just walking them down the line where they get to a point in reasoning where they then look like a fool, or they can't continue to agree with what their opinions are.
I always say, so, as a personal injury lawyer, even when I did defense, you learn a little bit of everything, right? So you're learning all these different fields of medicine, but sometimes there's also economists involved that have to calculate different future damages, the wages that somebody's going to earn for the rest of their life and things like that. And so you prepare the best you can. And like you're saying, you can't, I didn't go to medical school. I'm not an economist. I'm not even good at math. And so to go toe to toe with them, but you try to keep them in this box, right? You're like, here's the questions that I've prepared. And I remember I was taking this deposition once of an economist, and basically my own expert had prepared the questions for me, right? And I mean, I'd kind of tailored them, but like, these are the questions that I had. And what a lot of these experts will do is you'll ask a question, and then, if you read the deposition transcript, questions one line, answer page and a half, and there's no answer, right? And so I think as a personal injury attorney, especially cross-examination, like you're saying at trial or during depositions, I remember saying to this economist, "Sir, I don't know what the answer to this question is, but I do know what an answer sounds like." And that was not an answer.
You get a page and a half.
And I said it with a smile, right? Yeah. Like, I'm trying to be good-natured about it, but like, I think that's the trick, is like juries and like, you've got to know what an answer sounds like. And they're going to do everything they can, especially if you ask them a question they don't want to answer. They're going to do everything they can to not answer. And they're probably never going to say yes or no, but you've got to have them answer the question. And you've got to do it in a way that, like, you got to find the line, because if the jury knows they're sitting there and you just go over the same question over and over with this guy for 30 minutes, they're going to go, "We got it, man. We get the point. We know what the answer probably is, even though he doesn't want to say it. Like, let's move on." You want to make sure that you leave them with the taste in their mouth. They're ticked at that guy, and that it doesn't switch over to you where they're annoyed, like, "Okay, man, you've made your point,"
Yeah, one of the cases that I lost on, I think, losing a trial as a plaintiff's attorney, there's nothing worse, right? There's no worse feeling. Losing a case, an insurance defense attorney, like, is just sitting there, standing up with your client and hearing the verdict and realizing you lose. It's just so devastating. Like, you never lose that feeling. We had this case, and we tie it back to our doctor, our expert that was up there, and he could not give a straight answer to the defense counsel. And some people don't know, but during the trial, jurors can ask questions. And so the juror had written down this question for our expert and put on there, he said, "Just answer yes or no." And so the judge reads it, and our expert goes, "Well," and it was just right there. It was just stab in the heart. And it was, yeah, you for us, and I just need the expert to answer. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's a yes or a no. And it happens. I've had a case where my client rear-ended somebody, and yet we still won. And our expert was just up there, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, which was perfect. That's all I want, right? Just be as honest as possible.
Yeah, all of us as human beings, and it doesn't mean we're always right. Sometimes we're wrong. But we can all tell when somebody's hiding something or when somebody's avoiding something, and it's just, yeah, it's the worst. It's so much better to just come out and go immediately, which is nice to start out. Like, as a plaintiff attorney, you get to talk first at trial. First, you get to speak to the jury and go, "You're going to hear some crap," right? And let me tell you, some of it's true, right? And sometimes I can even make them laugh a little bit, you know what I mean? And go, but we wouldn't be here if I didn't strongly believe that there was a good reason, and here's what it is, right? Because they, in the beginning, they know that if we win, our client's going to get money. So in the beginning, they don't trust our client. And they know that if we win, that I'm going to get money. So they don't trust me. And they don't trust, and you can kind of draw a circle out, right, of the people that they trust, like client, me, spouse, friends. Well, if your friends come in and testify, they're probably not going to get any money. Coworker, they're not going to get any money. And so, like, you can build the web out of people that the jury will trust and trust more. And it's all of finances, right? Whoever they think is directly attached to a verdict, they're going to have, at least in the beginning, some preconceived notions, right? And so to just get ahead of those in the beginning and let them know, like, I'm not some, whatever somebody thinks of, people always say, "I'm not some sleazy lawyer." I don't know what I guess there's sleazy people or whatever you think, people that are too slick in all walks of life, but people definitely have preconceived notions about lawyers and personal injury lawyers. So
Yeah, no, and I've definitely run into some sleazy lawyers. Usually they're on the defense side, is my belief. But I shifted on pretty early in my career. I only worked for the insurance companies for 2 years, and it was the fact that when I was doing depositions, which was the majority of my time, was just doing depositions. Maybe 1 to 2 depositions a day is probably what I averaged, and the focus was always on trying to spin things and make the person look like a liar. And I hated it. Like I could not live with myself because it just ate at me saying, I've got to go in and attack this person. And it's a mom, or it's a police officer, or it's, some college kid, right? And I've got to go find a way to attack him. And I just couldn't do that anymore. And I was driving my Buick. I still drive my Buick and making decent money, but again, focused on, hey, I'm going to pay off these student loans. And then I made the shift right there. Made much less money coming over to the personal injury practice. But how come you did this? I mean, right, because you were a very successful defense attorney, did it for, was it 9 years as a defense attorney?
7 or 8.
7 or 8 years.
And a half, I think.
Yeah. So, but then you left that lucrative career, right? Good salary, company car, and then left to shift to come to represent those people that are injured. How do you, I guess, number one, how do you convince your wife, right? Because 4 kids. And then how do you personally do it?
I mean, my wife's going to be on board for whatever. Like, she just sounds corny, but she just believes in me, and she also trusts that I wouldn't just, put our kids out of room and board, just because because I felt like it, or take a bad risk. The other thing is, it's a small town. I know plenty of people. I could get my old job back if I needed to, or if things absolutely went terribly. I know plenty of firms here in town. I can call them up and go, hey, I was trying to go out on my own. It didn't work out. Can I come work for you? And probably they'd let me come work for them, right? So that also helped, like, give me the confidence. But number 2 was like, yeah, I just kind of got tired of a couple of things. One, financially, I loved where I was working. And the people that I'm working for are friends of mine, and they were so generous with me. And if I hadn't enjoyed working for them, I probably would have switched years before. It wasn't that I just loved doing insurance defense. It's just like, I just loved working where I work. We were all friends. Everybody was cool. They were generous with me. But it got to the point, in any industry, you get to the point where, like, you're just a really great employee, and that's all you're ever going to be. You're bringing in a bunch of money for the firm, but they own the firm. They're covering all the overhead. They took the risk. And they were scared to death 15, 20 years ago whenever they started the firm, when they had nothing and they started this thing. And they're not just going to, like, hand you a piece of it now, like, when they've worked so hard for what they've got. So you just become a really profitable employee for them. And so I thought, man, I guess I could be comfortable here, or I can leave. And it was, I don't want to say an easy decision as far as like, oh, this is easy, I'll go do it. But like, I knew what I had to do. Like, I had wanted to be an entrepreneur for years. I have plenty of buddies that have started different companies like that. And, I'd always listen to all these books and podcasts about what to do. And it was like, well, I think I can do it. And then as you start to look around, and, this is not necessarily like, oh, looking down on other people, but like, you start to realize the people that have gone out on their own and that are totally doing fine. And you kind of go, man, if that guy can do it, like, I'm going to be just fine. But I knew I needed a partner, or wanted one. I shouldn't say it needed one, but, I think I did need one. I wanted one. And I looked around, and Scott Rogers, who actually worked, like, his uncle was my boss, and more than my boss. I mean, my mentor, like, he and my dad and, some other lawyers at the firm, but definitely Steve, day in and day out, Steve Rogers was the guy that, like, just answered all of my questions, Scott is his nephew, and Scott was a partner at a big defense firm. They're a national firm. They're called Mesner Reeves, and he was a partner there. I mean, it's a big firm. Like, he was doing great and was trying all sorts of cases. And I called him. I was at a mediation, and I knew I was going to do it. And I just said, I'm going to do this. Do you want to do it? And the thing is, I'd been thinking about it for a year and a half. Scott had not thought about it at all, and still was like, okay. Like, let's do it. And we basically like met up for lunch soon after that. And I was like, here's everything. We started going to some different firms who said they'd send us cases. And he was like, but before I make it official, I want like 5 firms to tell us they'll send us cases. And I just said, we might have 10 firms say they're going to send us cases, and they might not send us a 1. So
Yeah.
like you kind of got to be in or out, you know. I'd love for you to be in. Let's do this thing, you know. But we're gonna have that's just how it works. We're gonna have people with the best intentions look us dead in the eye and go, "I'm gonna send you cases," and they're not going to. And sure enough, that happened, right? And I don't have any ill will towards those people. I'm sure they meant it when they said it, but we all get busy, you know. But we've been fortunate that when we both were defense attorneys, Scott's been out a little longer than I have. He was like 9 years as a defense attorney. You know, not everybody's gonna like it, but like, for the most part, people liked us, and lots of our friends were plaintiff attorneys. And so when we switched sides, we just reached out to all these different firms, and we're like, "Hey, send us your cases, your runoff, as we call it, right? Like the cases that you don't want, either because they're tough or because personality issues with the client, whatever it is." And people just started sending us cases, and before we knew it, you know, we started with, you know, one case. Shout out Ryan Saldana, he's a lawyer here in town, that, you know, was an arbitration case, right? Like a smaller case.
Yeah, your fees are probably going to be, you're going to spend more time in making any money.
You got it, right?
Yeah.
We settled, we started with one case, and, you know, now we're up pretty much, we're always around 80 or 90 cases, which is a lot for some firms. And, you know, to the billboard guys, nothing, right? They signed up that a month. But we've grown pretty steadily, you know, and now for these 7 months. And so, well, of course we were going to make it. Like, and, you know, when you say you've made it, like, you know, who knows, right? Everything could come crashing down tomorrow, but probably not, right? Like, probabilities wise, things are on the right track and we're trending the right way.
Right, for sure. And you talk about it was a year and a half that you're trying to consider it, trying to figure out how to do it. Internally, what was that battle like, dealing with that for a year and a half, trying to decide when, how it was all going to come down?
Yeah. So the funny thing was, my job became like easier during that time. I felt like I was doing less and less and making more and more. And it wasn't that I was getting lazy. It was just like, I was just getting better at it. I was getting more efficient. I had a great team around me at the firm I was at. And they were good at their jobs. And so like, I was just kind of doing less and less. I had all my own files. And I was just kind of like delegating to a good, and the thing, you know, I was doing all the lawyer things, but I was making more money every year, and they were treating me really well. But I knew that it was like, okay, like I'm going to be locked in, like at this lifestyle, like this is it, right? Like it's not going to go up much from here, maybe incrementally year over year, but like I'm going to be doing this job in 10 years. If I don't do anything, like I'm going to be doing this right now. And then the other thing was, I had talks about partnering up with different people. The difference was, it was friends of mine who already had their established firms. So they'd had their own PI firm, their own personal injury firm for maybe 10 years or 5 years, you know, and they were doing well, but they were like, I'd like somebody to come in and not even partner up. I want you to come help with this. And I would tell them, I can't just come work for you. You know, if you want to partner up, even if we're not 50-50, I get it. You got something going on, but it's got to be like a partnership agreement that we can eventually be 50-50 on. And that happened with 2 different firms, still good friends with both of those guys. And in the end, and no hard feelings, they were like, I'm really just looking for an employee. Like I'm really not looking to give up equity. And I said, totally. I totally get that, but I can't come work for you. You know, I gotta be rowing the boat on this thing, you know, up in the front of the boat. I don't know that my boat analogies are great on that one. But anyway, you know what I mean? Like,
you're right.
I need to be, and it's not just like I need my name on the door. It's like,
you want a skin in the game. You want the potential.
The potential, and also just like, I want to call the shots. You know, like I want to be the one that says, here's what we're going to do today. And Scott and I are obviously equal partners, and we run everything through each other. But like, we're always really honestly on the same page. And, you know, I'm sure we'll have disagreements at some point, but like, we also have a very, very similar sense of humor. We don't take ourselves too seriously. Like, we're both super easygoing. We both have 4 kids. Like, we both have other things going on besides law. And that doesn't mean that we don't work super hard. I mean, Scott's an animal. Like, that guy works like crazy. He should probably work less, Scott, if you're listening to this.
Yeah. So 7.5 years. The firm that I was at before I moved out onto my own, I was with them for 7 years. And one of the hardest things for me was to go in there and tell them I'm leaving, because I love them. I still do, right? I still have a decent relationship with them. But it was hard to walk in and say, hey, thanks for mentoring me. Thanks for teaching me everything. And now I'm going to go off and do this on my own. Like, that was, for me, other than telling my wife was easy, right? Because it already happened. I told her, but telling them was really tough. I mean, it ate at me for the few days before going in there and doing it.
Oh, yeah, man. It ate at me forever. I mean, like, leading up to it, you just have this pit in your stomach that I'm going to go, like, they've invested so much time and money into me, and they've treated me so well. They've given me everything that I've asked for, and they've been so great. The only good thing was it wasn't a huge surprise to them, because about 1.5 years before I left, I went to them and I said, hey, I just want you to know I'm talking about partnering up with this other guy. I don't want to do defense work anymore. I want to do plaintiff work. And one of the partners at that firm, Dan Carvalho, who is an amazing attorney, he like, seriously, Dan is like one of the top personal injury attorneys, maybe in the country, definitely in the state. I mean, probably definitely in the country. But he runs a small thing where, like, he really just has a select handful of cases. And in the end, there just wasn't enough to share, right? Like, he was like, well, why don't you keep doing defense work, but try and bring in some plaintiff work, and you can work on some of my cases. And I 100% believe that he meant that when he said it, but it just really didn't happen, And so when I finally went to them and said, okay, I'm actually leaving now for real, they were disappointed, but I think that they were happy for me. Like, they had 1.5 years to kind of go, yeah, probably this isn't going to be forever. Even though before, like, they had the plan was like, hey, so my dad, all of my bosses, my dad had originally hired them out of law school when they were attorneys, and then they got to hire me out of law school. And so it's kind of like the legacy, right? Like, hey, this kid's going to take over. And I just kind of realized, I was like, man, I don't want to, these guys have a great thing going and they're awesome lawyers. But, as far as taking over, that really wasn't something that was actually going to happen. And if it did, they're not going to, they're in their mid-50s. Those guys aren't quitting anytime soon, So it was like years down the road. I was like, man, I can't wait around for something that may or may not happen. I got to take control here.
You got to face resistance, right? It would be easy to stay there instead of confronting it and saying, all right, I'm moving on. But you opened up with a partner instead of doing it on your own. And what kind of considerations did you take into account before doing that, right? Because I opened up on my own, and it's been great, right? You say you like having the ability to make the decisions. For me, that's like one of the big consternations in my life, is saying, okay, like, I've got to make the decision, and I'm learning, okay, the sooner I make the decision, the sooner it's going to move forward. But it's not something that I really appreciate, is having to make the decision. But why did you decide to partner up with somebody instead of just doing it on your own?
Yeah. So Scott and I, while we have very similar senses of humor and are honestly fairly similar people, we have different strengths. So I just have, I wouldn't say like I'm such an entrepreneur, because I'm not, but like, I really want to be, like, I really want to run the business and grow the business. And I like getting into the finances and like the marketing and what are we doing and how can we grow and what are we spending, what are we making, like all that kind of stuff. And Scott has no interest in that, zero interest, right? Like, I'll tell him and he's fine, and like, we go through everything together. But Scott, when we have a motion come in, like the other attorney files this motion to strike our expert or get all this evidence out, Scott's the one that's like, well, that's against NRS 42.9397 and the Johnson-Windsor v. Jensen case. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, man. And he gets into the weeds on that stuff. He is so smart and such a good writer and such a good lawyer, but doesn't want to be a businessman. Not really, you know what I mean? Like, and I don't mean that he couldn't be, because he could, but it's just not his thing. It's not really interesting him. And so our split is that I handle the business and claims stage, right? So cases that are not in litigation yet, settlements and that kind of thing. And he handles all of the litigation. Because honestly, like at the size that we're at right now, unless I just hired a lot more employees, like there's no way I could do it on my own. I have no idea how you're doing it on your own. But when a motion comes in or something like that, and I'm kicking back. Like, hey, if Scott needs some help, which he usually, never does, like that's on him, like he's doing that. Now our only deal is that like we both love going to trial. And like I said, our fears that, we don't want to become claims adjusters with law degrees. And so any trial that we do, schedule allowing, we'll do it together, but the day-to-day litigation, that's his deal. We were supposed to be in trial 2 weeks from now. We were both very disappointed that it's settled. We put an offer out there that was like, we think we can beat this. We kind of hope they don't accept it. And, the insurance company accepted it and we settled. Our client's happy and everything, but we'd have rather gone to trial,
Yeah, make that payday a little bit bigger. So, partner in a firm, you got 4 kids at home, but you also dedicate a lot of your time to your church, right? How do you find any balance in that? You're a businessman now, right? Having to really fight for what you're eating at home. And then how do you find time to then dedicate additional several hours, right? 10, 15 hours a week to your church?
Yeah. And I mean, I'll be honest, I'm sure it's not 10 to 15 hours a week. Like it's a lot less than that. But some days it's more this and some days it's more that. But, you just got to have your priorities. And my priority is my family, first and foremost, above everything else, right? Then probably my relationship with God, right? Just making sure that I'm praying every day, that I'm showing gratitude to my Heavenly Father, try to read my scriptures here and there and just kind of remember, just to get some perspective, right? Then my job, right? And, what I owe to my clients and to Scott and everything like that. And then, right, in our church, my calling or like my assignment at church. And that's just the way that I prioritize it. And so, when there's things to be done, I go out and do them. There's certainly probably more proactive people that have their callings at church that are like looking for ways to serve and everything like that. And I really do my best, but like, there's just only so many hours in the day. You can do what you can do, you try to delegate and you try to get help to the people that need it most. And you can't help everybody.
Yeah, right. The balance of time doesn't necessarily mean that you're splitting the time evenly amongst each other. You're just keeping moving forward, right? You got a certain destination.
Yeah.
And with those different priorities, you find a way to fit everything in, to be there for everybody. Yeah, without a doubt. And one thing that I really love about being an attorney is being able to talk to clients and help them in a position where they don't know what to do and they're looking for solutions, and they can talk to me and I can communicate to them. And también yo hablo español, y por poder hablar con ellos en español es aún mejor porque están hablando con un abogado que ya puede comunicar con ellos también. Y usted mismo habla español.
Sí, yo también, y también mi compañero Scott. Entonces, para poder comunicarnos con los clientes, a ellos les da confianza bastante porque aunque tengamos un buen equipo, cada persona quiere hablar con el abogado mismo. O sea, quieren hablar conmigo o con Scott y les da confianza saber que nosotros les entendemos. O sea, cada abogado va a tener ahí en su billboard que se habla español, pero ellos sí mismos, ellos no hablan español, es su equipo, su asistente o quien sea. Y cuando ellos se dan cuenta que nosotros hablamos español y pienso yo lo hablamos bastante bien, entonces les da confianza que no es que solo le vamos a entender por medio de otra persona, pero les entendemos ahorita.
It's been great having you here talking about how you've moved forward in representing people, whether or not they speak English, whether or not they speak Spanish, but representing actually people instead of companies and large corporations. And so someone who's looking to hire a great trial attorney, how can they reach you?
Yeah, so you can find us online. So my last name is Mitchell. Scott's last name is Rogers, and we're Mitchell Rogers Injury. So we use the acronym MRI, just like, if you're neck or backers, you go get an MRI, we're MRI. So Mitchell Rogers Injury. mriattorney.com, and our number is 702-702-2622. We tried to, get one that you could remember. We're on Instagram, Mitchel Rogers Injury Law. So you can find us. I mean, we're not, unfortunately, we're not going to be in the first couple of names that come up when you Google personal injury lawyer Henderson, but you can find us, MRI.
Yeah, great. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.